So it's always something that I'm not particularly proud of, to think that the United States is, by any statistical measure, the largest jailer nation in the world. We lock up a larger percentage of our population than anybody. And that either does or doesn't include, depending on the numbers you're looking at, the number of people who are under continued supervision through parole programs, which carry their own burdens and often go on too long. It also sometimes doesn't include the number of people who are locked up but not tried because of the bail system here, because of the long waits for a trial. There are a lot of people who are sitting in jails right now who haven't been convicted of anything. So that's a problem, and admirably, there's been kind of a national consensus in the last 2 decades that we don't want to do things that way. People have reasons for wanting to make these changes that are different. I mean, some of us just see that as just an insane thing to be doing, to be locking up so many people, and morally wrong to incarcerate so many people for so long. There are other people who think it just costs too much money to have that many people incarcerated, which it does. It does cost a lot of money. So we tried to change that, right? We've tried to alter the size of our prison populations. We've tried to shorten sentences. We've tried to divert more people into alternative programs that don't involve incarceration. We tried a whole bunch of things. And I think we're all feeling pretty good about that. But one thing that we came to realize as we were getting ready for this show is maybe one thing we haven't done all that well is plan for people after they get out. How good are our reentry programs? How much access to housing do people have when they get out? How much access to how many kinds of jobs can they have? Stuff like that. And when you look at that, it's a little less impressive, maybe a lot less impressive. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. What happens? And it's not just jobs and houses, too. I mean, most people, if they wind up in prison, probably got there through some fairly traumatizing life before prison. And then prison itself, this is not like, going to graduate school. This is prison. It's traumatizing. So as people get out, they are not necessarily emotionally or psychologically on the same level as people who've just been part of society during that same period of time. So how do we deal with all this? Well, we're going to talk to 3 formerly incarcerated men here today. We're also going to talk to some people who have been who are trying to be part of the solution, and we're going to try to at least give you kind of a picture. So in the studio with me right now are Larry. We're just going to use his first name. He's a husband, father, and as I say, like all 3 guests here, formerly incarcerated. Dai McKnight, program manager of Young Fathers Reentry Project for Family Reentry. Jeff Grant, former lawyer, now minister, co-founder, prisonist.org, co-host of the Criminal Justice Insider podcast on WNHH in New Haven. And we are going to just begin by just talking about, I think, what it's like when you get out. In fact, before I go into some of the nitty-gritty of policy and stuff like that, I think it's important to share experiences and particularly. So, Larry, describe what happened the day or the first week or the first month after you got out. What did you have in terms of resources or things to kind of just keep you on your feet, get you back into society?
First thing I want to mention is you're right. I am 58 years old. I just recently got married and took the responsibility of a child. And I have to say it's invigorating.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
But let's not lose focus of why we're here. I want to talk about the day I got out of prison.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that day.
They put me in a van, and all I had was a box. In this box, I had my personal effects that I sort of accumulated over the years that I've been in prison. A few pictures, a couple of letters I wanted to keep, and some clothing. And they put me in the back of this van, and they drove me to Hartford. Now, mind you, I'm not from Hartford, never lived in Hartford, and I didn't know my way around when I got here. But they dropped me off at St. Peter's Church here on Main Street in the parking lot. And they said, you have a nice day. Oh, by the way, we have a bus pass for you. And I'm thinking that this bus pass is going to be my ticket to wherever it is I need to go. But it was just a 2-hour bus pass from Connecticut Transit. So here we are. I'm standing in this parking lot. I just done over 33 years. And I've never been to Harvard. And before I got to this point, I was not given any sort of valid information on what I should do from here. Granted, they did give me an ID, but I just didn't know where to go. It's January 30th. It's one of the coldest days in January. I didn't have a coat. I just had a gray sweatshirt and my tan pants, the tan that we wear as prison garb in prison, and state-issue boots. So I'm standing here. And I see these group of people standing in front of St. Anthony's, what they call a homeless sort of distribution place, where you go there and they place you in a homeless shelter in Hartford. Now, remind you, it's wintertime, so they're placing people everywhere. I finally get to a McKinney shelter, and I have to tell you, it's the worst place I've ever seen in my life. There's crackheads there who's coming off their high. There's it was just a bad situation. And being that it was crowded, I didn't have a bed to sleep in. They gave me a cot that sat on the floor. And so I slept on this floor for about a week before they finally gave me a bed. Mm-hmm. But the meals was just like prison food, tasteless, not warm. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, what do I do next? So my instinct tells me, let's look for a job. I mean, how else am I going to get some money? So I went down to City Hall. I got a map of the city. And I started listening to some of the radio shows and some of the businesses that they like to say their addresses on or whatever. And so I started going to these places and started applying for jobs. I did this for, I'm going to say, a month before I finally got my first job.
It was a former offender, I think, that gave you a job too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I went to this restaurant. I'm not going to name the restaurant because I don't know if they want me to put their name out there, but I went to this restaurant, and this ex-offender who I know personally, who we done time together with, and he says, you looking for a job? I said, yes. He said, I'll tell you what, come tomorrow at a certain time, and we're going to start you. Well, what about the application process? Don't worry about that. We'll take care of that tomorrow when you get here. And so I worked for them for 18 months. Mm.
So, Larry, I want to just say we're going to talk at the end of the show about a restaurant business that is proud to and wants people to know that they hire formerly incarcerated people. So I just want to pause your story there and get everybody else here involved. You know, Dai, in a way, your path is a little bit different. Larry was what they call EOS, right? End of sentence.
Yes.
You get out, end of sentence. You were parole, and in some ways, my sense is parole has a little bit more of a pipeline, a little bit more of an off-ramp for you to get out and get into society. Fair? Is that fair to say or not?
I actually wasn't parole.
Okay.
I was EOS.
You were EOS too, okay.
But I was fortunate enough to get to the halfway house 9 months prior to being released. Mm-hmm. The difference is that and let me give you some information for a backdrop here.
Sure.
So listeners can understand. At one point in time, if you were on parole, EOS hasn't really had any supportive services, basic needs services, unless there was some kind of mental health issue attached or substance abuse issue attached where you could get basic needs through ATR and ABH. But as far as just reentry needs, EOS has always kind of been out in the wilderness. But if you were on parole at one time, when I got out, there were really no services, reentry services for parole or EOS. But when I started working for Family Reentry, the Fresh Start program, which was a great model that they built, patterned after the Delancey Street project in San Francisco.
And the Fresh Start is down in New Haven, right?
Down in Bridgeport. That's the original Fresh Start program. And then they took that name later, but it was originally in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And they had a contract with parole, and there was reentry, basic needs, and supportive services that were available. And that was after I got out. That was 10 years ago when I started working for Family Reentry. Those services were in place. However, when Governor Malloy cut the budget, Connecticut's done some great things as far as like there's still some things going on pre-release, but when Governor Malloy cut that budget, he destroyed the reentry model. Because in order for this mechanism to work, you have to have both components of the machine. You can't just have pre-release services, but when the guys get out, there's no post-release supportive services. So when he cut that budget approximately, I think it was maybe 3-4 years ago. I could be wrong about the number. But we've been suffering ever since in Connecticut, and it's running counterproductive to using the word that we're a second chance state, because there are no state-funded supportive services for reentry and basic needs with people getting out on parole or EOS right now. If there are any services, they are funded by the federal government, which those grants only run for 3 years. They take a lot of that stuff for data to talk before Congress about what works and what doesn't work. A lot of times they don't renew those grants, or it's privately funded. And a perfect example of that is two of our programs at Family Reentry, the Young Dads program, which went into Manson Youth Institution, that grant ended, and we don't have any funding, but we're still running a program with no budget. We're still going into facility pre-release and trying to kind of be creative to help these guys when they get out. And the Transitions Mentoring Program, which is ran by John Maley at Family Reentry, when they cut that budget, John ended up securing private funding. We've been private funding ever since to keep that program going for young men who get a mentor. They get a Yale tutor when they come out of Manson Youth Institution and return to society. So to answer your question in a nutshell, when I got out, there was nothing. But I was fortunate enough to go to the halfway house and be wise enough to try to work and save money to have some kind of cushion to help me reacclimate back into society when I get there. But 10 years ago, Connecticut was on the right track. We were making headway. We were the premier model for second chance society. But without that post-release component, we're really spinning our wheels because we need both pieces to make the machine work properly.
Right. Just to give people, before we go to Jeff, a little kind of numerical sense of this. So from August of 2017 through July of 2018, about 11,000 men and women were released from prison, with about 6,000 leaving through some kind of parole or other kind of discretionary release. They typically do have a little bit more help, continuing help in finding housing and employment, but almost 5,000, 4,677, served full sentences and left prison without supervision and in many cases without support. So, Jeff, your story is a little bit different. You were in there for a white-collar crime. I think you were also in maybe a different prison system. What was it like when you got out?
Well, I served almost 14 months in a federal prison in Pennsylvania for white-collar crime I committed when I was an attorney. And on the day I got out, some friends picked me up, and we had 5 hours to get to a halfway house in Hartford, right around the corner from the studio, actually. And I served 3 weeks there and then went on home detention. And at that point, I didn't have a home to go back to. So I had to scrape together a friend who reluctantly put me up in her house and had to meet all the criteria. And then I started the road back. And just like guys, every sentence is a life sentence, Colin. And the truth is that I didn't know that I was unemployable, but I found that out fast. I started to volunteer, thinking that would be a road to at least meet people and show that I'm capable of showing up and be trusted. And pretty soon, I started to volunteer at Family Reentry, where Dai has been for the last 10 years. And they asked me to join their board of directors after about 6 months. And at the time, I was the only formerly incarcerated person on the board of directors of a large criminal justice organization. About 7 years later, they asked me to be their executive director, and I did that for about 2.5 years. So I got to know the Connecticut prison system from working with the guys, from doing therapeutic work, from doing work and learn programs, from actually running the nonprofit, and from being on the boards of directors of some other nonprofits. And I can tell you that I agree with Dai 100%. This state was absolutely on the right track 10 years ago. We were doing innovative work, and then the money shut off. And on July of 2016, we woke up one day and Family Reentry had lost $2 million per year of fiscal support from the Department of Corrections, and we were operating on a shoestring trying to make it. Luckily, the agency is in very, very capable hands right now and doing great. But I left to do work directly with the white-collar people. That's what we started prisons.org, which is a ministry helping white-collar defendants and their families. And because it's true to my heart, and also a topic that's is very kind of Connecticut-centric, Fairfield County-centric. And I'm proud to be able to do that. But believe me, if I didn't cut my teeth for 10 years in the system here, learning what works and what didn't work, I would be of no value to anybody right now in this as an advocate and as a program director.
I think what you're hearing, too, if you're listening right now, is valuable in terms of sometimes we have these conversations about the state budget that are kind of abstract, what percentage of it's going to be cut, how is it going to be balanced, stuff like that. There's sort of a general sense of public applause when the state budget gets smaller. One thing that we do try to bring up sometimes is vulnerable populations often feel the first and worst of those kinds of cuts. These aren't just numbers. These are people. These are people that we want to ultimately successfully help, that we want to successfully reincorporate into society, whether it's this group of men right here or some other vulnerable population. So, Larry, I think it's almost impossible for any of us to wrap our minds around what it's like to step out into the daylight after 33 years. This isn't just a problem of you getting a job. It isn't just a problem of you finding a place to live, although those are gigantic problems. It's got to be incredibly just psychologically traumatic.
Yes,
I don't know, is there anything you can say about this to help people understand just what it's like to be in those shoes?
Well, I want to go back a minute. Now, when I was in prison, we had several therapeutic programs that helped me along the way, that sort of groomed my mind to grasp the situation that I was presently in, and hopefully to it turned me around to the person that I am today. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, those programs don't exist in prison anymore, which is one of the reasons why I decided to join your talk show we want to exploit that before we leave.
Right. So to see what those programs were.
Well, some of them were drug programs. Some of them were programs that basically helped to, I want to say, it was about anyways. It helped me bring about some health issues that I had. Mm-hmm. And another program that I found that was very good was the art program that we had there. And that program allowed me to sort of, it gave me the use of my creative techniques, like I did in drawing and paintings and so forth. And it helped me to express artistically and examine the psychological and emotional state that I was in at the time through my art. That program needs to come back as well. But anyway.
I think there's one program that was called a Lifers program.
I was in a group. Yeah, so I was in the Lifers group.
Yeah. And what did they do there? What did they do?
We was a bunch of people who were never going home anytime soon. And we basically had a format that helped us deal with day-to-day issues surrounding our incarceration, surrounding our mental state, actually, and, how to cope with life in general, and the fact that, none of us was going home anytime soon at that time. That was a great place to go down and build, so that helped me along. And like I said, there are programs that was there that did help me, and it molded me into the person that I am today. They have I did religious services. I did quite a few things.
I want to talk about this religious stuff because that's a commonality among the three of you. Dai, for you, faith was a big part of this. Faith was maybe a big part of your reckoning with how you're going to live the rest of your life.
Absolutely. For me, it was and before I say that, answer your question, I just want to say that even though we're up here talking about these issues as people who were formerly incarcerated, we want the community to know that responsibility and accountability is important to us. It's not hug a thug day. We're talking about real issues that affect real human beings and the collateral damage of how that affects other human beings in society towards public safety. But as an individual, I take full accountability and responsibility, and that's one of the things that drives me to do what I do, because I can't undo what I did, but if I could prevent other situations from occurring and give people a better quality of life so they don't feel that crime is an option, then that's my way of making amends. So let me say that for me, it was the path of Islam. But whether you take Christianity, Islam, NAAA, maybe you're into yoga, whatever it is you have an opportunity to embrace another value system, take that value system, implement it in your life, and it makes you a better person where you're able to be of value not just to yourself but to society as a whole.
Are those programs, the kinds of things you just enumerated, are they in good shape or are they also facing cutbacks?
Well, there's religious chaplains that go in. I actually go in and volunteer as a religious chaplain in another capacity, religious Islamic chaplain for the past 10 years. And then there's paid chaplains, Christianity, Jewish, Islam. And so those programs are up and running, and those are some really great programs because they give a lot of men and women inside hope when they're in a hopeless situation. They bring light into a dark place.
So, Jeff, you're a minister now, so talk about that path.
Well, when I got out of prison, like everyone who goes through this type of experience, they go through a transformation, whether they know it or not. And part of my transformation, a large part, was faith-driven. And 2 years after I got out of prison, I decided to apply to seminary, and I applied to and was accepted by Union Theological Seminary in New York. And that was the first time I had to tell my story. I was someone who had committed a crime and someone had been to prison. And either despite or because of that story, they admitted me to seminary, and I went there for 3 years. I earned a Master's of Divinity, and then I started working in churches and at Family Reentry along the same time, and in Bridgeport. And then it's become a path to a different kind of spirituality that I really understood. I mean, I've been in a recovery for 17 years, sober 17 years now. And that was really the core of my spirituality. And I give credit to my being sober when I went to prison, because when I went to prison, I was almost 4 years sober. And that's, I found out, is very rare, because there are guys who are doing drugs right up to the prison door. I mean, we're addicts. And the fact that I found recovery through the 12 steps and was able to go to prison clear-headed and stand up and be a responsible person for my family, for myself, for my community. When I came out of prison, I had over 5 years of sobriety, and I was able to come back and tell stories, and not just as a cautionary tale, but also hopefully as a model of how you can live your life more by following right action, right intent, right behavior, and that's what we've tried to live by ever since.
All right, so we're going to take a little break here. These men are going to stay with us for the entire show. I want to talk specifically about housing, about having a place to live in the next segment. Beth Hines from Community Partners in Action will be joining us, and our guests in studio will be giving their perspectives as well. All right, and we are back in studio with me, as I said before, our three formerly incarcerated men, Larry, Dai McKnight, Jeff Grant. We're going to talk specifically about some of the support services that are and aren't available, as we have been doing straight along here. I'll just put a little bracket on this and say, one of the things that Dai said, and I think it's been echoed kind of around the studio here today, is an awful lot of things that used to be supported by the state and need to be supported by the state, ideally will be supported by the state, are currently privately supported by philanthropy. And so if you're thinking about where to make a donation and these stories reach you somehow, think about maybe supporting one of these organizations that has pitched in to help. And also think about patronizing some of the organizations that do employ formerly incarcerated people. You're going to hear about one of them at the end of the show, but you might want to go buy Dave's Killer Bread, which is also a big leader in that world. But make your choices. Anyway, so joining us now is Beth Hines, Executive Director of Community Partners in Action. Welcome to our conversation.
Thank you for having me, Colin.
So let's talk about a phenomenon that I think most people don't think about very much. Larry told a story about getting out and basically having almost no idea where he should go. So what part of what can you say about the number of people who are discharged from prison and go almost seamlessly from there into homelessness?
So based on our experience of operating the Hartford Reentry Welcome Center, which opened its doors in September of 2018, this program actually serves people who are end of sentence, who are discharging with no supports. So they're not discharging to parole or probation. So they're not able to access some of the services that the state is able to provide. And the biggest challenge that we see for people coming to the center is homelessness. I think when people are incarcerated, they may think that they have a place to live when they're getting out, but when they get out, they end up homeless upon release. And I think that what we need to do is a better job of trying to identify who is at risk of homelessness before they are released from prison, so that providers like Community Partners in Action and other providers that serve the reentry population can be prepared for their release, so we're not ending up with people coming to our doors in crisis.
Right. So, Beth, I think one of the things we know about homelessness in general is it makes it very difficult to provide services to people who don't have addresses. You can't get to them. You can't find them to give them services that they may need or be eligible for. I would guess that's exacerbated here. There are services, I would imagine, ranging from employment and job counseling to various kinds of therapies and stuff that we would want to have delivered. I would also guess a lot of them are being delivered through nonprofits at this point. But how do you deliver them to people you can't find?
Exactly. Well, what we do though is when clients come to us, we always give them their next appointment. So they know when they can come back to see us. And they can come back and see us whenever they need us, but at least they have a next appointment. So if for example, we're able to secure a housing resource for them, or we are looking to make a referral to, Journey Home or Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness, or even employment assistance, at least we know that they hopefully will come back in for that appointment. Sometimes the participants will have cell phones, but the challenge with the cell phones at times is, the purchase of the minutes. So, for example, if somebody is trying to register with 211, the Coordinated Access Network for housing to get on, a list for supports, sometimes it can be 45 minutes while they're on hold just before somebody picks up, a live voice to pick up to take their information. Unfortunately, our clients, they can run out of minutes during that time, and I don't think that we're not always thinking about the obstacles and trying to overcome those obstacles. These obstacles are so real for our participants. And the other thing too is when somebody's coming home and they come to our door in a crisis and they have nowhere to go that night, if they've got a history of addiction or, they're very likely to use, to try to, wipe away the fact that they don't have a place to live tonight. And with what's on the street these days, they're at risk of overdose. So there's so many other things that can happen when somebody does not have a place to live. And then if they don't have a place to live, where can they take a shower to go to a job interview?
Right. All these things are interlinked. I want to sort of go around the table, get a little reactions from everybody. Hands are going up and thumbs are going up and all kinds of stuff. So get a lot of body language from everybody. I'll start over here with you, Dai. You had your thumbs up pretty early on in this conversation. Just react to what Beth is talking about.
Yeah, I put my thumb up because I wanted to salute CPA in Hartford for, even though it may be in a limited capacity, for providing those essential services to people who EOS. And I'm quite sure that that's not state funded, but it's something that they were creative to get grants, maybe federal, maybe private funding from philanthropists. But I know that it's definitely probably not state funded. But I think the model that they're using, it needs to be enhanced and brought up to full scale so they can serve more EOS people who end of sentence get out with no parole, no probation, all over the state. But I think it's wonderful, the work that they're doing in Bridgeport. When it comes to homelessness, we get guys that EOS, they can't even get to the shelter. They have to do the 211. They have to do the CANS assessment. It's a lot of bureaucracy. In Bridgeport, the only thing that we have for them immediate shelter is a wonderful organization called the Rescue Mission, and they'll allow you to stay there for 30 days, but you got to come wait for the bed every day. And then we kind of refer and direct a lot of our guys there that get out of prison with nowhere to go, that don't have anything in their EOS. So what they're doing in Hartford, that's very, very important, and I pray that can actually be enhanced.
Let's go around the table here. You're next, Jeff.
Thank you, Colin. Yeah, Beth and I know each other a long time. I was on her board of directors for a few years. And Hi, Beth. So whether at Community Partners in Action or Family Reentry or any of those nonprofits, the reason they were defunded was because of the Connecticut fiscal crisis. But there was kind of a perfect storm of what happened there, because Connecticut figured out that because we were a Medicaid expansion state and they had changed the rules for Medicaid eligibility, so that when you immediately came out of prison, you became eligible, the state figured out that what they could do is they could pass some of these services on to providers that would accept Medicaid. So the contracts that were at Family Reentry and Community Partners Action and others for mental health services and for substance abuse services and services like that, those mandated services through parole or the services that were paid for by the state then passed to the federal government to reimburse. So what's happened now is that people come out of prison and they don't know where to go. They don't know where to go for their primary care. They don't know where to go for their substance abuse or their mental health services. But these community health services are there in Hartford, for example, Wheeler, in New Haven, Cornell Scott Hill. Those are examples. But people aren't coming out of prison and finding them primarily because if you're an addict, you don't know that you're an addict. And if you have a mental health problem, you don't know that you have a mental health problem if you're in the throes of it. So the people who need the help are not finding it. So there's a huge divide between the users who need it and the providers who are providing it, and that problem has not been solved in the state yet.
All right, Larry, you also had a hand
Yes,
up.
I wanted to ask the question or maybe make a suggestion that maybe perhaps we can extend those services to actually go into prisons and sort of recruit these people or sort of find out when are these people going to get out so that this information can be passed to them so that upon getting out, they could just go right to where it is they need to go.
That's a great suggestion. It's just, Beth, that seems like common sense too. I'm amazed that isn't the case. That people's acquaintance with these problems begins the day they're released, not a year before they're released. Now, let me let Beth answer that, and I'll go over to you, Dai.
So certainly, we have, as an agency, have been advocating for pre-release services forever. It's critical. For the Reentry Welcome Center, we do not currently have the capacity to do any in-reach where we would go in and meet with somebody a few months before they are released. And we are privately funded. We're very grateful to the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving for funding the Reentry Center in Hartford, and also to the City of Hartford for their support of the project. And there has been a number of donors and churches who have been incredibly generous to support the center, and so we're truly grateful. But that in-reach piece is so critical because that would avoid the crisis on our doorstep when somebody comes to us.
Yeah.
Now, and Jeff's 100% right. You know, a lot of those services were cut several years ago. One of the things CPA has been fortunate to obtain is a SAMHSA grant from the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration from the federal government, which is allowing us to go in to Cybulski and to York 2 months before someone is discharged so that we can do an assessment in terms of what their needs are going to be upon release, which will include housing, substance abuse, mental health, employment. And then what we will do is we're teaming up with Intercommunity here in Hartford, and anybody that is in need of substance abuse and mental health will be immediately connected to Intercommunity so that they will have that whole person care, the primary care, everything from medical and dental to mental health and substance abuse. We also were fortunate to be able to secure 6 recovery support beds through Intercommunity. But this is such a small scale.
I was going to say that. It just feels like there's a bed to volume of need disparity there, right? And I'm sure it cuts across all the services. The amount of services that you really need to deliver to the volume of people. I mean, I just said 11,000 in roughly a year. I mean, maybe not every single one of them needs the kind of services we're talking about, but a lot of them do. I'm guessing the carrying capacity just isn't there.
The what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
The carrying capacity, the ability, the pipeline isn't big enough to handle everybody.
No, in fact, the SAMHSA grant is only funding enough to serve 55 people a year.
Right. So before we run out of time here, and I don't know who wants to talk about this, Diane, maybe I'll start over here with you. I mean, another part of this is there are laws and rules about whether you can discriminate against people who have been formerly incarcerated in relation to housing and stuff like that. But I'm guessing that there are also some realities that about just where you can manage to live if you're part of that world.
Absolutely. I think that before I answer that, if I may, I just want to, because I have my hand up, I just want to go back to what Larry said. The pre-release component is very, very, very important. And evidence-based research supports that you should go in and engage the client 6 months prior to release, which would contribute, a high percentage to the person have a successful reentry when they return to society. Now, family reentry, when we lost the contract, that was our model. We go in 6 months prior to release, engage the client, we conduct the assessment, help build a treatment plan, and when they get out, we help them to fulfill that treatment plan and take care of their needs. When that contract was cut, we have not stopped. I go in every Tuesday or every other Tuesday night to Willard Cybulski since the contract was cut voluntarily, and we still have 30 guys in a group. Knowing that resources are limited, these guys still come out because they want change. And when they come out, Fred Hodges is a wonderful, our Director of Community Affairs and Family Reentry. He's real creative, and he still tries to find services and resources for these guys with no budget for that program. Mm-hmm. And we have consistently within, even when the budget was cut. So with that, I'm saying the message is if we can restore and bring these programs back up to full capacity, I believe that it will be a great positive impact and continue the work that Connecticut was on track to doing.
All right. So we are going to need to take a break here, and we could do a whole show, I think, on the limitations that are put on housing. I mean, in public housing, sometimes even if your family's there, you can't live there. Parole officers don't want to have offenders living with other offenders. There's discrimination. There's barriers. We could do a whole show on just that. But time is short. We'll take a quick break here. We'll come back. All right. So first of all, I want to thank the producer who put this whole show together. That's senior producer Betsy Kaplan. Betsy Kaplan is a very, very conscientious person. And I can always tell when she's worried that the show is not going to be good enough, not going to be perfect. So she's been worrying about this and wearing a hole in the carpet, pacing back and forth about it for days and days and days. This is complicated stuff, and there's no way that in 49 minutes we're going to be able to get to all of the problems and all of the issues. But I think she's done a tremendous job putting together this conversation. Thanks also to Kion Wolf being on the board, making the whole thing sound good. Tomorrow we are going to shift gears and talk apropos of the holiday about Halloween. Anyway, that is to come. Right now we are here to talk to our guest in studio. That's Jeff Grant, Diane McKnight, and Larry. And also joining us from one of the – I said at the beginning, Larry was able to find employment at a restaurant through another ex-offender. Well, there is one restaurant around here that is proud in public about trying to give second chances, trying to give new opportunities to formerly incarcerated people. That is Bear's Smokehouse BBQ. And joining us right now from there is Cheryl McDonald. Welcome to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Right. First of all, I just want to say thank you for what you're doing. In the course of getting ready for this show, I also discovered, I'm not promoting this necessarily, but if you don't feel like cooking Thanksgiving dinner, they have a really good deal where for like $135, you get like dinner for 8, basically, that you just take out and you serve at home. So think about that. Go on their website. Anyway, explain why you do what you do. What's the philosophy behind wanting to hire formerly incarcerated people?
Yeah, so thank you first. We are often asked that question, and I have to be honest that when we opened, which was just about 6 years ago, it was not part of our original philosophy. It was just something that came to happen for us. We had a need for employees when we first opened. It was just Jamie and I. I was still working full time, and it became quickly apparent that we needed some employees. I worked at the time for the Hartford Public Schools. I had a connection to the Adult Ed Center, put up a flyer, and we hired somebody who had a background. And our next hire, same thing, someone that had a background, had been incarcerated in the past. And then we created we had a relationship with Billings Ford, and had a few more people come to us. And we just had great success. And I actually attribute our startup to having these folks on staff with us. And so I think it happened organically. As we had this success and we didn't even question it, just became part of what we did. And as a result, we've gotten to know some folks at the halfway houses, that we've gotten a pipeline of employees, et cetera. So it's kind of how it happened.
It's a great concept. And I assume, one of the questions is, how do you find people? I'm guessing at this point, people find you. I mean, there aren't that many places that do what you're doing right now. I would guess people come and find you.
Yeah. In the beginning, like I said, we had these relationships with Billings Forge at the time. And then a few other halfway houses that, honestly, I don't even recall exactly how we got connected, but I just knew the value myself of, finding people that would show up. One of the great things about a halfway house that I found was they were going to be reliable. They were getting a pass to come to work. And so they were going to show up, which you don't often get, from someone who doesn't have that kind of structure for themselves. And in the restaurant industry, especially, or, really in any industry, having people that show up and they're ready and willing to work is sometimes hard to find. So.
Yeah. Let's get some of these guys to react a little bit to that. Larry, you got something you want to say?
I wanted to say that, thank you, Bears, for, sticking up for some ex-offenders. I know all of us are not perfect, but still, some of us still have the desire to perform to expectations upon our release. And you're not the only business that does that out there. There's quite a few in the Hartford area that have your along your line of thinking. But for those that don't, and if you're on a borderline of, hiring ex-offenders, hopefully you'll look at a bill that was passed 2 years ago with the General Assembly, Bill number 6219 that gives tax incentives to small business or businesses in the Hartford area. So, if you want to use that as your startup, go right ahead. It's there for your pleasure. And thank you, Beard.
Yeah, Dai, I hope we have time. We only have about 5 minutes left on the whole show. There are still some barriers to employment that you think you see as kind of unnecessary impediments to getting people back to work.
There are a few barriers that legislatively they may have to be changed. But first, let me say to the company, proper name of it, Bears?
Yeah, Bears.
Thank you so much for giving our guys opportunity. And here's an interesting statistic for you. Approximately maybe 75 to 80% of the guys that come out that are serious about reentry, when they go to work, approximately 75% of that group, they end up moving into upper management because of their integrity and their work ethic. And I'm quite sure a lot of business owners have witnessed where they've put the keys in people's hands who were former offenders, and they were some of their best, most reliable and loyal workers. So I thank you real quick. But two areas, to get a PSL, public service license, that law came out after 9/11. It was to prevent, I guess, terrorists from getting in certain places, getting certain jobs. But it affected people who are formerly incarcerated. If you're formerly incarcerated, you can't drive a limo, you can't drive a cab. But someone, no disrespect, but someone who's been in the country for maybe 20 days, and if their paperwork is right, they can drive a cab and a limo. In order for us to do it, we have to go through an appeal process. You can't be a security guard since 9/11. You can't get a guard card and function in the capacity of a security guard if you were formerly incarcerated, which being formerly incarcerated has nothing to do with terrorism.
Mm-hmm. All right. And Jeff, I heard a little nod out of you, particularly when Cheryl was saying the thing about they show up on time because it's sort of part of the structure they're in.
Yeah, I think that there's a huge incentive right now for people to hire ex-offenders, and some of that is tax incentive driven. Some states have direct subsidy programs, but I think if we can't figure this out at a time we have 3.7% unemployment, so that there are reasons to take chances and to give the benefit of the doubt to people that you might not otherwise at higher unemployment rates, what are we going to do when and if it swings the other way? So right now is the time that employers can reach deep into this pool of people who are smart and can be trusted and are just brimming with the need and the integrity to be able to move forward. And also for your businesses, you probably can't find other people. So right now is the time to do it.
Okay, so Cheryl, one thing that Larry said that I thought was interesting, he said, not everybody is going to be perfect. You have had some disappointments, although interestingly, I think that people who have not worked out have gotten in touch with you sometimes if they're reincarcerated to say, go ahead.
I was going to say, actually our experience has been, and I think that's where the hang up is with employers. I'm fortunate. I had an HR background and I've worked in, the public school systems, and you see a lot with that. And, there's always kind of that nerve, a little bit nerve wracking for business owners of, are you making the right choice with hiring and navigating just, employees and HR practices in general. So, but once you can kind of get past that and get even just one person on board and see that positive experience of, the loyalty, the trust that is there, because you're extending that to them when you have that open dialogue and they know that they're not hiding anything from you, and you're still extending, trust and a job and an opportunity. It's reciprocal. You get that back tenfold as an employer.
All right. We're going to have to stop there. We're unfortunately totally out of time here. I want to thank everybody who helped out here today, especially these three men who are in studio with me sharing their stories. And, one thing Jeff said during the break, Connecticut is ahead of the rest of the nation or at the lead, and we're still not doing anywhere near enough. These are programs that are inadequately funded, just addressing a sliver of the population's needs. But we're better than most states. Think how sad that should make you.